for complicated people. People complicate the steps, and Dr. Bob, before he died, he said, "You guys don't mess this thing up because it works." And I'm real particular about the steps. I don't like for people to change anything, add anything, substitute anything, but that's just me because I believe the steps were God inspired, and that's good enough for me. So, we talked about what step one is, and we spent a lot of time on step one because if we miss step one, we miss it. Now, my belief in step one for relapsers, chronic relapsers, they've never taken step one. Once you take step one and you really incorporate and put it in your brain that you have an addiction and that it has to be treated, then you've taken step one. So, and I've worked with a lot of chronic relapsers, and if they want to know where they failed, it's in step one. And admitting the powerlessness of the disease. And then, if we're powerless over the disease, the solution is we must find a power. If we have no power on our own, which we don't because we've tried everything in the world, regardless of what addiction it is, we've tried it all, or most of us have. And so by ourselves, we are powerless. And so the solution is finding a power greater than ourselves. Now, because when we try to play God in our own lives, it does not work, or we put someone else upon the pedestal and let them be the God of our understanding, that doesn't work. So, step one and two are fact-finding, fact-gathering steps. There's not any recovery in one or two. You're just gathering facts in one and two. And then in step three, that is the first action that's taken. We just make a decision. We break our information down and we see, do we want to continue in the problem or do we want to go toward the solution? And it is that simple. And it's not easy, but it's simple. The steps are simple. So once we make a decision that we do want to recover, and some people will do that 1, 2, 3 recovery waltz. They'll never get past step three, and that's when the action really. That's the first action that is actually taken, is in step three, to make a decision if you want to continue, if you want to go forward, or do you want to stop. So once we make that decision, the next line in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it talks about doing a fearless and thorough searching and fearless inventory of ourselves. And we're good. Folks like us are good at taking other people's inventory. Oh, we can take everybody's inventory, and if they'll just listen to us, we can straighten them out. But it doesn't say their inventory, it's ours. And what we've got to look at is, like we talked about, any business that doesn't do annual inventory, a retail business or a grocery store or whatever, to get rid of what's not working, what's not selling, and to enhance what is working. So that's what an inventory is. And it says we get it all down on paper. And then step, 4, by this time, we recommend by step 1 that you have a sponsor in a 12-step program. That is the disease that you are working on. And many of us have more than one addiction. And guess what? You get to be a card-carrying member in several organizations. And then you get to do the steps in each one. It's not a blanket coverage. I wanted one 4th step to cover it all. It doesn't get it, I've, belonged to Debtors Anonymous. I've belonged to Al-Anon. I've belonged to Overeaters Anonymous, Al-Anon, AA. So you go down the list, and each one of them, you've got to work the steps individually on each problem. But you got to figure out what the problem is first. So in the step 4, what we inventoried is what we looked at is that we all have character defects. We wouldn't be human if we didn't. God made us like that. And what those character resentments are, those character defects are resentment, self-pity, fear area in the pride, overdeveloped pride, and problems in the sex area. So we inventoried all of that to see our part. We don't, they may have a bigger part in it than we do, but that's not what we're inventorying. We're inventorying our part. You may have this much and they may have that much. That this is, we've got to figure out what is blocking us off from the sunlight of God's Spirit, and you'll see that in the 4th step. And then it says to share that with an understanding person, and we recommend that you share it with someone. Like I said, by this time you need to have a sponsor and a program that you're working the steps on. You find a sponsor, and they're taking you through these steps. Now, you're gonna, depending on the sponsor, there's so many different ways to work the steps. I think they're very simple. Don't complicate them. They're a simple program for complicated people. And, some sponsors will hold a person up 6 months before they do an inventory. That's their business. I'm totally against that. Because if we don't see what we need to, the stock in trade, the good that we have, and hope that God will increase the good in us, and then see those things that are blocking us off from Him, that's what a good inventory is. And I think it's written the way that it needs to be, that instantly you go into doing a 4th step, then you do the 5th step and pick someone, an understanding person, to listen to you. And then at the end of step, so it says here, in step 5, we pocket our pride and we go to it. That's what we do. We go illuminating every twist of character, every dark cranny of the past. Once we have taken this step, withholding nothing, we are delighted. I'm sure if there's everyone on this screen, I suspect, have done a 4th and 5th step. And once you do that, what it says is we are delighted. I love that word, delighted. Delighted. And we can look the world in the eye. We leave those things in the past, but we see our part. We can be alone at perfect peace and ease. Our fears will fall from us. We begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. And by the way, that is what this whole process is of the 12 steps. The 12 steps is a program of action, a spiritual program that will march you up face to face with the God of your understanding. There is no failure to it. And along the way, if you're a real diehard non-believer, just forget it. You don't have to believe right at first. You just have a suspicion that it might work for you. And you just keep doing the steps. And if you do, you will at the end. I will promise you, I'll give you a guarantee. The book gives you a guarantee. It will march you up face to face with the God of your understanding. So we begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. We may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but now we begin to have a spiritual experience. There's a difference between having a belief and having an experience. The feeling that the addiction problem has disappeared will often come strongly. And some, it takes a while for that mental obsession to be removed. Just because you don't have that flash of light type of spiritual experience that Bill W. had, it doesn't mean it's not working. It's working. You just take the action. You might be like Dr. Bob. For 2 years, he wanted to drink, and the way he kept from drinking is he worked with others. He worked with others, and he did not take a drink. And then one day, he had an awakening. He woke up, but it was 2 years into his recovery. We feel that we're on the broad highway, walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. So, what it does, we return home, taking this book down from the shelf. We turn to the page which contains the 12 steps, carefully reading the first 5 proposals. We ask ourselves if we've admitted anything, because we are building an arch. See an arch. Visualize this big arch. And that's what we're doing. We're walking through that. And when you get through that big arch, when you get on the other side, you're going to be free. Free at last. Is our work solid so far? Are the stones properly in place? Have we skimped on the cement put into the foundation? Have we tried to make mortar without sand? So it is about really looking at the 4th and 5th step and seeing if there's anything that we've left out. Now I want to show you step 6 and 7. Joe McQueen, who trained me in the alcoholism field, called 6 and 7 little bang bang steps, that they work together, steps 6 and 7. So it says, if we can answer to our satisfaction that we have completed step 4 and 5, we then look at step 6. I mean, this is just, now people have broken down, and I've sat through many step studies, big book studies, every kind of study concerning recovery, and people break it down in different ways. But the original, the big book, it's like that, a sentence after a sentence after a sentence. Now you can break all of this down, and I have sat under big book scholars that break down every word and get the dictionary out and identify every word. You can do that. And you might want to the more that you study about the steps. But you really don't have to, because it's all right here. Everything we need is right here. Now, if you want to know more about the steps in a little deeper depth, and some people like this manuscript and some don't, and that's called the 12 and 12 of Alcoholics Anonymous. The 12 and 12 was written by Bill W., as was the big book, when he was 16 years sober. 16 years sober. You know, the desire to drink, I'm just looking like painted up something. The thing about in the big book, at 16 years sober, Bill didn't want to drink. That mental obsession had been instantly removed from him. But he was irritable, restless, and discontented. And he had a hard time looking at himself in the mirror. He did not like Bill. And so 16 years sober, like I said, he didn't want to drink, but he wanted to kill himself. There are those of us, and I include myself, that have that obsession. By the grace of God, he did remove that from my brain. By myself, I could not have removed that. You know, I'm like a cat with 9 lives from age 8. From age 8 on, I had 9 serious suicide attempts, and by the grace of God, it is by the grace of God that I'm sitting there, not in some mental institution somewhere or dead. And so Bill, so we're in good company if we don't get all of the relief through the steps, because we are humans. We are human beings having a spiritual experience. And so Bill I repeat it, 16 years sober. He didn't want to drink, but he wanted to kill himself. The depression, and he wrote a letter, and we'll go over that in the January again because it bears to repeat. It's a book on depression. And I will tell you, if Bill was here today, they didn't have the medication back then that we have today that can relieve depression and anxiety. And some of us, there are people particularly, I've been around a long time, and some of the old timers were totally against any medication for anything. And I have seen them. I've been at women's retreats, and some of the old timers, there was one, Jackie J, she was just kind of the mother of recovery, and she would have the nerve, if she suspected somebody being on an antidepressant or something, she'd go open their purses, dump them out, and look. So a lot of the old timers were totally against any medication. We've become more broad-minded today, and there's better medication available to us than there was back in the early days. Nevertheless, I believe if Bill was here today, he would be on some kind of medication because he suffered deeply from depression. And so that's when he wrote the 12 and 12. That's when he expanded on the steps. So if you want to do a little deeper dive into the steps, and I'm sure all of y'all have seen the 12 and 12, read it. I love the 12 and 12. And it's a compliment. It goes right along with the big book. But anyway, and he wrote that at Stepping Stones up in his little office. It's called Wit's End. Well, there's my buddy, Marcel. My Lord have mercy on my soul. If y'all want to know the master of the steps, I could just turn this over to him and Bradley. Who am I to be doing this with Marcel on here? Good morning, friend. It's good to see you. Good to see all of you.
He did probably have more years. I think he has about 75 years of recovery.
I think he does.
One of the few more time of recovery than you.
He needed some words of wisdom this morning. I looked up.
I'm here to learn from you.
I didn't recognize you at first, and now I do, and now I'm nervous because he's a master at this. I've sat at his feet, so here we go. All right, so we talked about then what, in step 5, if we could answer to our satisfaction that we had covered everything we needed to cover. And I don't know that we do that in that first 4th step. I don't know. That's why I think it's important that maybe we do. But I think we are as honest as we can be in that first one, as honest as we can be. And so then we do the 5th step, and we ask God before, as we go into step 6, we ask God for the willingness, because willingness to help us to be willing. And these steps, like I said, Joe McQuaney taught me that he called them little bang steps that work together. So in step 6, it says we have emphasized willingness as being indispensable. Are we now ready to let God remove from us all the things which we have admitted are objectable? Can he now take them all, every one? If we still cling to something that we will not let go of, we ask God to help us be willing. And I noticed out here by the side, I don't know what year I put that, but I put self-hatred out by the side. Now, I wrote that. I don't know how long I've been in recovery, but I'll tell you, this is a program. The problem, if you want to know what your problem is, go look in the mirror and say, good morning, problem. We are our own problem. And I don't know how many years I have been in recovery when I wrote that down. that still I had some self-hatred, because that is really the core. A lot of times, we have we either over love ourselves and put ourselves way up high on that pedestal, or we just hate our own guts. And, and so we learn to let God love us in this special way. So step 6 is, all right, so step 6 is we were entirely ready to have God remove all of these defects of character. I mean, step 6 is so easy. It's easy, but it's not. It is just being willing to let go of the things which are blocking us from the sunlight of God's Spirit, blocking us from our spiritual and emotional growth. That's what step 6 is to look at those character defects. Now, if you have a good sponsor that has heard your 4th and 5th step, they might help you. I mean, they will. They'll help you see what your character defects are. And you might not like that. You might not like, because it's like they're taking my inventory. I've already taken it. They don't need to take it. But if you're going to work with the sponsor, they're going to get to know you pretty well. I know when I came back from treatment, I mean, I've been in Al-Anon since 1968, and it was 85, and I went to treatment for my eating disorder. I've done many steps, taken people through the steps, worked at a treatment center, taught the steps. And me, of all people, I didn't think I needed to take another first step. I'd taken many. I knew all of that stuff. And my sponsor, thank God, she knew more than me. And she said, no, Tennie, you will go through the steps with your eating disorder. I mean, I'd gone through them many times while overeating. Every big book, I mean, my main big book, the first big book, had food spots. It still does. Food spots all over it. I'd be reading, praying, and eating. Read, pray, that show. But I mean, and it would be, my book was awful. And so she said, nope, you're going to do the steps with your eating disorder. And, by that time I thought I knew more than she did. But anyway, I agreed to do it. We happened to be in Dallas at a conference, and she said, oh, by the way, bring your 4th step and I'll hear it while we're there. So I gave her I did a 5th step with her. And then I can be very persuasive sometimes about things. I said, okay, so why don't you write down what you think my character defects are? And she said, Tennie, I don't want to do that. No, I'll help you look at them, but I don't want to. Well, I just kept on and on and on and on until I drove her nuts. And she wrote down one word, and it was procrastination. And I got up out of that hotel room and ran out of that room, ran downstairs, walked up and down the in front of the hotel. Now, if you want to know if you have a character defect, when someone says something and you revolt like that, you just might have it. You just might have it. But I took that as a character assault, procrastination. And she also said chronic lateness. Well, I was late here this morning, but I have an excuse because I was very sick last night and I didn't think I'd be here. So anyway, normally I'm on time, but anyway, I'm covering my tracks this morning. But I didn't want to hear that. The truth is hard to hear. The truth is hard to hear. And no one, I mean, I had my life set up that people didn't confront me about much. I don't imagine very many people confront Marcel about much, or Jeff, or Brad, or Neil. I mean, some of you old timers here, I don't know that people confront you very much. I don't know, particularly Marcel. He's just kind of, but anyway, I had my life situated where people didn't confront me. I mean, I was program director of a treatment center, and I did this and I did that, and I sponsored people, and I've done blah, 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 and I spoke at conferences, and all I was another suffering addict, period. That's what I was. So, what step 6 is to just be willing, is the willingness to let go of the things that are blocking our spiritual and emotional growth. That's all step 6 is. You get willing. Willingness to grow is a readiness to give up control. Y'all want me to read that one again? Willingness to grow is the readiness. You're ready to give up control. This was written before we ever knew about codependency. But in that book, in that letter that Bill wrote, 16 years sober, on depression, he talked about codependency, how he had to give up the dependency on even AA. He had to give it up for his wife, people he sponsored, because that was his life, and he got to be into control. He had to have control of everything. I didn't meet Bill, but I've met a lot of people that knew Bill. They loved Bill. They loved him to the depth. And he was a controller. It had to be Bill's way or the highway. And a lot of us addicts are like that. Aren't we, Brad? A lot of us. Excuse me. All righty. So what step 6 is then is being willing to eliminate the old will. If you want to know what the problem is, go look in the mirror. It's self-will run right. And so in order to recover, this is so simple, is to be willing for the old will to change. Old will, W-I-L-L. We can't change that. God can and will if we'll let Him. Now, we do have a part in that. We can't just lay back and say, okay, I'm up to step 7. I've done all of these first 6 steps. Okay, God, now zap me well. He has the power to do that, by the way. But we do our part, and God blesses the effort, because it's been pointed out in steps. We wrote it all out ourselves. No one else wrote it. You can't pay somebody to write your 4th step. You write it out yourself, and then your sponsor helps you see in step 5 your character defects. In step 6, you're just willing to have them removed. You're just willing. The willingness is there. And then, so in step 7 is, I want to see, these are just one line after another. Do y'all know that in the big book? It's not all that we have to do this and this and this and this. It's a simple program for complicated people. So when we're ready, see, when we recommend that people take step 3 with a sponsor. I would always, and I recommend people, you don't have to. You can pray standing up, laying down, whatever. I just think kneeling is helpful, or it is to me. And in step 3, we invite God into our lives, perhaps for the first time. That's that conscious contact with God. Then in step 7, and there's a prayer at the end of step 3. And then in step 7, after we look at, step 6 and see what those character defects are, and we have the willingness, then there is a prayer. And what it says is, when we're ready, we say something like this: my Creator, I am not now willing that you should have all of me, the good and the bad. They didn't say it says good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. And then it says, we have completed step 7. See how simple that is? It's simple. But it is absolutely essential that we take each step. And now it is the thing about step 7, which says that we ask God to remove these defects of character. But we get up off of our knees and off of our hinds or our rear ends, and we act as if they're removed. We know what those character defects are, and we start acting the other way, the opposite way, and God blesses the effort. Now, I will tell you, God has the power to zap those character defects from us. He has that power. But He knows that folks like us that are addicts, if it comes too easy for us, we're not going to do it. So step 7 is we take the action and God blesses the effort. Now you'll hear somebody doing the steps that has an entirely different point of view. But my point of view is, if I keep acting, and I'll tell you, I am human and all of you are human, and we're going to have character defects, some character defects till the day we die, because that's how God made us. But this 12-step program will help us when the reason that we are, uniquely different, if we don't look at our character defects and change our behavior. See, when we're acting out of our character defects, we hate our own guts. We don't like ourselves. And when we don't like ourselves and we get all up in, that self-hatred and everything, it'll go up in our brain and say, well, I know how you can ease this pain. Just go have a drink. Go eat a donut. Go watch a porn movie, whatever your addiction is. The brain remembers, and the brain remembers that sense of ease and comfort. And I will tell you, in recovery, I don't think the brain forgets. It's still back there. We have that memory of the sense of ease and comfort. But if we can pick up that phone and call a sponsor and say, okay, remind me of how bad I got. Remind me of my character defects. Remind me. So we have acted out of them. We call the sponsor and we say, this is what I did, blah, 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 blah. And it gets it out there. You speak it out loud to God, or to ourselves, to God, and one other person. You don't have to tell the whole wide world. So steps 6 and 7, like I said, are little bang bang steps. And step 7 is, we just want such an instant cure. Do y'all want an instant cure? Anybody want an instant cure? So step 7 is humbly ask Him to remove our shortcomings. Now, that's what step 7 is. 6, we get willing to have them removed. And some of those character defects have worked for us. They have worked for us. If you're a thief, if you're a scandal, whatever. If you got relief from the drug, alcohol, if you got relief from overeating, addiction works for folks like us. It works, or we wouldn't keep doing it. We're not a bunch of idiots. If it didn't work, we'd just do it twice and say, well, I don't do that anymore, and we'd go into something else. So, but addictions work for us. And so this is a planned program of action that will help us one day at a time, not use. So we get willing in step 6 to have our character defects removed, because it's really those character defects, usually this is what we drink over or overeat over or do whatever addiction, is our character defects. Because I've never worked with an addict yet, and I've worked with them right out of prison. I've worked with parolees. I've worked with a hitman from the mafia. I've worked with some bad, down and out people. But you know, I've never worked with one yet that didn't have a conscience. Once they get clean and sober, alcoholics have a conscience like you wouldn't believe. And then if you can continue to work with them and they go through those steps and they get a sponsor and they begin to live in God consciousness instead of the addict consciousness. That brain, we're not going to ever forget being an addict. We might switch off addictions. But until we really look and on the inside and see where that pain's coming from and work on each addiction, we're not going to find a lot of freedom. Okay, step 7 is humbly ask Him to remove our shortcomings. I was going to say, Joe McQueen talked about shortcomings, that our character defects are what we're long on. We're long on resentment, self-pity, fears, overdeveloped pride in areas in the sex department. That's what we inventory. Those are our character defects. And then Joe said that what our shortcomings are love, tolerance, and patience. That's the only thing. Love, tolerance, and patience is the only thing that will offset resentment, self-resentment, and self-pity. The only thing that will offset fear is courage. The only thing that will offset pride is humility. And that's what they're talking about here, humility. If you think you have it, we talked about it last week, if you think you have it, you don't. If you think you're all humble and just full of humility, no, you don't, because you're thinking about yourself. When you have a lot of humility and people say something about your spiritual journey or how you've affected them or something, it shocks you. You think, really? And, because we have a memory of how we have lived our life before, and that's good. I think it's good. If we ever forget where we came from, we'll go back there, I think. So, anyway, Joe always said that our shortcomings are what we're short of. We're short of love, tolerance, and patience. And that's what offsets resentment, self-resentment, and resentment, self-resentment, and self-pity. Once an addict gets to self-pity, we're gone again. Self-pity is pour me another drink, or pour me another milkshake. The only thing that will offset fear is courage. The only thing that will offset pride is humility. And the only thing that will offset sex is wisdom, to know the difference. And, when I'm working with sex addicts, what I encourage sex addicts to do, and I encourage anyone with any character defect that you might have that you're struggling with, any character defect, invite God into them. If you can invite God into that pornography movie and feel good about it, go ahead. I've never had a sex addict yet come back and say, well, that worked for me. Be careful what you invite God into. And if you can't invite Him into how you're living your life, you might want to look at it. I used to be a rager, and God removed that from me. Now, He didn't remove this little, I want to say little, it's kind of, my friend Misty here could probably tell you more about it than me. I get feisty sometimes, and I don't have bursts of rage like I used to, but I can get a little short. Let's just say that I get a little short with people sometimes, and it's particularly when they're not doing what I want them to do. You know, that may be small, but that is total self-centeredness, folks. So, steps 6 and 7 are important steps, and it's going to everything. Remember that arch that we're walking through. Every step gets us farther into going under that through that arch, and so that brings us up to 8 and 9, which we'll talk about when we meet again. But I want to open it up because you've got some people on here. Well, all of you, everyone that's on here, knows about the steps. So that's what I have. I could go on and on about 6 and 7 because I think there can be the meat of that's why they're in the center there. I think they're the meat of the 12 steps. If we don't look at our own character defects and admit them, it's the thing about it. It's like this little boy that had a yo-yo and had that string, got the string all tied up and a mess, and he couldn't get it untied, and so he took it to his mother and he said, he was all frustrated. He said, "Get that, fix this, fix this, fix this." That's kind of how we do God. Fix this mess that I have made. And so that's what the little boy, was wanting his mother to fix that yo-yo, get that string. And what she said is, "But you haven't let go." And that's what God says to us. We take all of our messes to Him, and He says, "But you've got to let go." We'll hold on to it like holding on to a balloon string all the time, saying, "God, help me," while we're holding on to it. So that's what I have on step 6 and 7 and a review of the first 5. Who wants to start?